Okay. So in our history textbooks, that is what we're in right now. History 2019-20. Go ahead and turn to your table of contents. And we're adding a new page. The new page is going to be titled, I'm going to have to look at how to spell this, Sagoyewatha. And that is not in my accent. Nope. Quiet. Sagoyewatha. And this is number 6. So today we are going to quickly get our notebook set up to take notes. So I'll move on to page 6. Today is March 12th, 2020. So at the top, I'll go ahead and label it as Sagoyewatha. But this is also chapter 12 in our textbook. And over in parentheses on this left side, I'll go ahead and put the pages, even though they are on the paper that I handed out to you. All right. And top right corner, I'll go ahead and write our number 6 in a circle. And then I'm going to set up my page, and I'm going to use a different looking pen for this. I'll go ahead and use my red one. You don't have to. I like to, though. So again, I'm going to do the same width from there to there. Go most of the way down the page until there's about 4 or 5 lines left. I'll do a line across. If you are a real stickler for straight lines, feel free to use a straight edge. Bottom, I'll go ahead and write summary. Put a box around that. And then back at the top, I will label this as questions. And on the right side, I'll label this as notes. A reminder that we call this type of note-taking method Cornell notes. So if you ever have a teacher in the future that's like, all right, we're gonna learn how to take notes or take Cornell notes, you already know how to do that. You guys are pretty good experts at this point after just a couple times. So now that you've finished setting up your note page, just like I have, your page numbers from the textbook at the top, the page number in your journal that this is, and the title, we want to make sure that we take a look at our questions page before we do anything else. So here's the questions page, which is uploaded online, and you can take a look at. But you also, if you're in my class right now, have this. And just a reminder, these are the things that we should do, and we should do them in order. Last time when we looked at your journals, there's a lot of people that didn't follow some of these things, and you lost points for it. So we're just going to have a quick reminder of that. The first thing we actually do is read the questions. We read the questions, like these questions first. So when we're taking notes, we actually realize that the notes we're taking will help us to answer those questions. And we purposely write that kind of information down. So, question from the audience was that, is it okay to go back and read questions over again in order to answer them or take notes on them? And that's 100% what you should do. That's what good readers do. They go back and reread, whether it's the text or the actual questions themselves. Okay, so after you read the questions, then it says read closely. So we're not just going through things fast, we're stopping and pausing as we read. We take notes on key information, so names, dates, page numbers. I'm going to repeat that again, page numbers. So this time, let's make sure that as we write notes down, we put a little number next to it in parentheses so we know that that's the page it came from. Last time we did not do that, and it was more challenging, I think, when you went back to answer the questions. All right, now for answering questions using info in your notes, here are the things we need to do in those answers. Number one, write in complete sentences. That was not a problem for most of us. Contain the question in your answer. That was about 50-50, like, maybe, you kind of did it, and I gave you the benefit of the doubt. But let's make sure this time we're actually doing that purposefully. Then it says, give evidence and the page number it was found on. I saw very few people that did that. So that would mean that we set it up just like we would when we do our information essays or our argument essays, where we say, for example, or on page 65, the text says. Those are great ways to cite evidence in your text for your answer. It doesn't hurt too also at the end of that sentence to put the page number, just like we would do an in-text citation. Finally, explain the evidence. So that's just this shows, the thing we talk about when we say analysis. A really great sentence starter that's easy for me to see and for you to use is this shows. The evidence shows something. So in last week's work, we were talking about the kind of person Jefferson was. So we might start that sentence with, Jefferson was the type of person who would, and then we complete that. Maybe he was the type of person who we would want to be friends with, okay, period. Say, for example, we quote from the text, page number. And then the third sentence might be explaining, this shows that he's someone who I'd want to be friends with because, and then we explain. So really no different than the work that we're doing in argument writing. Any questions about that? All right, let's move on. So let's read the question or questions. So remember, just answer 4 out of the 5. You don't have to do them all. That way, if there's one that stumps you, you can do the other ones. First one says, what do you make of Sagoyewatha's speech and situation? And how was the situation handled? So there's a 2-part question there. Number 2, what are 3 details in a speech that speak to you? So this is your opinion. What are 3 details that you can relate to or connect to? Explain how they make you feel. So when it says speak to you, that's then related to how they feel. So you're really just explaining how they speak to you. Number 3, the First Amendment guarantees the freedom of religion to American citizens. Why were Native Americans not protected in the same way? Number 4, Jefferson hoped that Native Americans would do one of 2 things. What were they? Was this fair to think that? Explain your thoughts. Finally, number 5, the book says on page 67, most Americans didn't care about what happened to Red Jacket and his people. Should we care now? Explain your thoughts. Okay. Go ahead and take a moment now, open up to page 64 in the textbook, and we'll start our reading. So at some point, you'll want to glue and cut out the questions and put them in. We don't need to do that right now, though, as a class. Right now, our focus is on taking notes correctly here first, and then doing the questions, and finally finishing with our summary. Okay, so we should now be on this page that says 12, an orator in a red jacket speaks. Let's get that nice and close for our viewing audience at home. I'll go ahead and start us with the reading. At the very time that Meriwether Lewis and William Clark were crossing the Rocky Mountains, a group of Indians was gathered on the other side of the continent at Buffalo Creek in the state of New York. They were Iroquois of the Seneca tribe, and their leader was the powerful orator Sagoyewatha. And again, remember the word orator means to be a powerful speaker. It means to be really a quality speaker. Okay. During the Revolutionary War, which all but the youngest remembered, the Iroquois had been divided. Some had fought on the American side, but others, like Sagoyewatha, had fought bravely for the British. Because Sagoyewatha wore a red English jacket in battle, the Americans called him Red Jacket. So we talked about writing down names. So let's go ahead and make sure we write down that name. And it would probably be helpful to write down his nickname. A reminder, because we are doing our notes telegraphically, we'll want to make sure that we do this nice and short. So Sagoyewatha. Ooh, I spelled it without looking at it that time. I get points for that. Sagoyewatha. And let's look back. It said that the leader of the Seneca tribe says they were Iroquois of the Seneca tribe, and their leader was the powerful orator Sagoyewatha. So, Sagoyewatha, leader, comma, Hey, here's a great time to make sure that we are actually spelling things correctly, since the word is right in front of us. So, Iroquois is spelled, ooh, see, I already spelled it wrong. Even teachers make mistakes once a month. So let's see. Iroquois, Iroquois. Iroquois of Seneca tribe. Seneca spelled Seneca. Was called Red Jacket. I'm gonna say fought with British, so we realize that's why. Period. Fought with British. This is not my best example of writing telegraphically. But since we're putting at the end here what page this is on, which makes it really obvious that this is a separate note, I'm going to write page 64. If we wanted to, we could pick up our next note right here at the end of it. Okay? All right. We're going to keep going with our reading. So we're right here now on page 64 at War's End. At War's End, Chief Red Jacket did not flee to Canada as many Iroquois did. He stayed behind and was made to sign a treaty that gave much Indian land to the new nation. Now the Iroquois were being asked to give up their religion. Some preachers had, okay, so we're starting to move on to religion. So I'm just going to make sure to make a note of that. Red Jacket. Not, as in did not, flee to Canada, signed treaty, gave up land. And that's still on page 64, so I'll put at the end a little note of where that came from. And now we can expect that we're going to be adding some information about religion. So again, Red Jacket, not flee to Canada, sign, it looks like a Q. Oh, QL. Signed treaty, gave up land. Page 64. Okay, last paragraph that we're going to read together. And then it's going to be up to you to finish the reading through page 67 with notes all the way to the bottom, questions based upon those, and finally a summary. Here we go, last paragraph. Now the Iroquois were being asked to give up their religion. Some preachers had come from Boston to convert the Indians to Christianity. The Senecas listened politely to the ministers. Then Sagoyewatha, Red Jacket, replied. His voice was strong and mellow and beguiling. Fine speaking was a form of art and leadership to the Iroquois. This is what Sagoyewatha said to the Christian ministers. I will leave that up to you to read that section that he has there. Super important to this chapter, our questions, and the direction that we're going as far as finding out our country's push into Native American lands and feeling like that was their right to do that. Before we move on, and I allow you to do that, just real quick here, over on the side, this says the 6 Iroquois nations are the Cayuga, the Mohawk, the Oneida, the Onondaga, the Seneca, and the Tuscarora. Down at the bottom, reading the bottom blue square, it says the Iroquois, name for North America, was Turtle Island, which is why Sagoyewatha calls his country this great island. What does he mean when he says, from rising to the setting sun? Okay, so the last thing we want to make sure that we do together before I leave you to work, we've got these notes. You'll finish the reading, doing your notes, then you'll move on to writing questions, finally summary. We need to make sure that we put our questions page on the correct page. So what I'm going to do right now, and you should do if you're in my class, and you might even do if you're listening at home, is get out a handy dandy pair of scissors. I think these were made probably around the time that Sagoyewatha was alive. They are so old and rusty. But boy, do they cut. Here we go. So as I'm cutting this, if you don't have scissors handy dandy, you might go ahead and grab some from the drawer that is labeled scissors. Imagine that the scissor drawer would have scissors in it. Natalie?
Your mom's been waiting for you for 10 minutes, sweetie.
Oh, gotcha.
Can I take that book
And Natalie, tell your mom sorry. Explain why. All right. Now I've got my page cut out so it actually fits. That way we don't have all these gross little pages hanging out and getting all crumpled up. I know that's a lot of our favorite thing to do, so that when I look in our journal, it's really hideous. But please spare me that. I'm going to take out my world's largest glue stick. Is it bigger than my hand? Not quite. All right. I'm going to glue it in. And I'm going to pull that page over to make sure that it's not getting folded up in the margin, that it's clear from that. I press it nice and hard so it doesn't fall out. And I'm going to move on now to the next page and title that so that we remember that this is our questions page. And this is still part of 6 in our journal. So I'll write a 6 in the top right corner. And I'll write chapter 12 questions. Don't forget to number the questions correctly when you go ahead and answer them. All right. And if you're in my class, I'm going to stop talking and let you work on that. And if you're at home, you can go ahead and stop the video